Hello, coughers. Have you ever felt like two completely different voices were arguing inside your head?
Just sit for a minute. You deserve to rest.
You're already late! Move!
Yet those two decided to show up today, so today's conversation is about something interesting. The space between resting and rushing. Because if you listen too much to one of them, life slows down too much. And if you listen too much to the other, life never lets you breathe. Sit down. Coffee's coming. Today's conversation is going to be a good one. Maybe you're not tired. Maybe you're living at the wrong pace. Because there's a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from effort. It comes from guilt. Guilt for not doing enough. Guilt for doing too much. Guilt for resting. Guilt for not resting. And that's almost cruel. You sit down to breathe, and suddenly you feel behind. You work non-stop, and still feel insufficient. Like you're never in the right place. Like you're always owing something: time, energy, results, progress. And let me ask you something honestly. When was the last time you felt at peace with your own rhythm? Not productive, not resting, at peace. I'm Coffee, and this is a coffee conversation. Here we don't run from you, but we also don't numb you. Because there's a quiet conflict happening inside you. On one side, the couch, he's warm, he's comfortable. He looks at you almost gently and says,
Just sit. You deserve a break. Tomorrow is fine.
And sometimes, you believe him. On the other side, the clock.
You're late! A move.time is running! You should be further!
And sometimes, you believe him too. The problem isn't resting, the problem isn't producing. The problem is when you start living in reaction to these two extremes and stop listening to yourself. If you've ever felt like you swing between procrastinating too much and pushing yourself too hard, stay with me, because today, we're going to talk about finding balance between rest and urgency, without romanticizing laziness and without glorifying anxiety. Sit, breathe, sit down, coffee's coming. And before we continue, answer this honestly. Inside your head, who has been running your days lately, the couch or the clock? There's a scene that plays inside you almost every day. You wake up. Before you even stretch, they've already started.
Get up! You're already losing time! The world doesn't wait!
Relax. He just woke up. 5 more minutes won't destroy the future.
And I'm here in the middle, holding the cup, watching. You grab your phone. Clock leans closer.
Look at this! Everyone's already producing! You should be further!
Everyone, or just what shows up on the screen. Come here. You're tired.
Tired of what? The day hasn't even started! That's exactly why he's not moving forward!
And that's exactly why he's exhausted.
I step in, because both of them sound right. And that's the problem.
Discipline fixes this! You just need to want it more! Chimmy's life! Don't waste it!
Life is also rest. You're not a machine. Feeling isn't failure.
And you feel it, because inside you, this debate is real. When you work too much, clock wins. You run, deliver, produce, but you never arrive. When you get too tired, couch wins. You pause, disconnect, delay. But you never begin. Clock points to the future.
You should be 5 steps ahead!
You're barely breathing right now.
Without pressure, there is no growth!
Without pause, there is no sanity.
Because what neither of them notices is that you're swinging between anxiety and guilt. You're not living, you're reacting. Reacting to urgency, reacting to exhaustion. Clock wants control, couch wants comfort. But neither of them wants balance. Balance requires awareness. And awareness doesn't shout. It speaks quietly, and it's almost impossible to hear. When two extremes are arguing inside your head. So let me ask you something. If you silenced both of them for a moment, what would remain? What would your rhythm actually be? If neither rush nor escape were in charge. Let me tell you something that maybe no one has ever said to you clearly. Your problem isn't a lack of discipline, and it isn't laziness either. The real problem is that you're trying to regulate your life through two emotional extremes. Clock doesn't really measure time, he measures comparison. He turns minutes into metrics of personal worth. If you produce, you matter. If you fall behind, you fail. And it's subtle, because it looks like motivation, but very often it's anxiety dressed up as ambition. Have you noticed how urgency almost never comes from the task itself, but from the feeling of falling behind? Clock doesn't just say do it, he says. You should have done it already. That's a huge difference. One thing is action. Another thing is action driven by fear. And when you live under that logic, rest starts to feel dangerous. Pause feels like delay. Silence feels unproductive. Now look at the other extreme. Couch doesn't represent healthy rest. He represents comfortable avoidance. He doesn't say recover your energy. He says, avoid this, you'll deal with it later. You don't need to feel this right now. And sometimes what you call rest is actually emotional escape. Escape from a difficult decision. Escape from a conversation you've been avoiding. Escape from the discomfort of starting something meaningful. Do you see how both sides are connected to the same root? Fear. Clock uses the fear of falling behind. Couch uses the fear of disappointment. One pushes you forward through panic. The other rocks you gently into relief. And in the middle of all this, you try to understand yourself. You swing between intense productivity and intense procrastination, between obsessive focus and complete shutdown, and you start believing your problem is personal imbalance. But imbalance doesn't start in behavior, it starts in the inner narrative. If your mind believes you only matter when you produce, clock takes control. If your mind believes you can't handle the pressure, couch takes control. Neither of them is a complete villain. But neither of them should be directing your life. Because balance isn't half urgency and half rest, balance is awareness of rhythm. It's knowing when pause is recovery, and when it's escape. It's knowing when action is building something, and when it's compensating for insecurity, and that requires something neither clock nor couch offer. Self-awareness. Have you ever stopped to notice what actually triggers your urgency? Is it ambition or comparison? And what actually triggers your pause? Is it physical exhaustion or emotional fear? Maybe the invisible problem isn't time, maybe it's the way you relate to it. And if you keep living in reaction to these two extremes, how will you ever discover your own rhythm?
So what's the solution? Work less!
Or maybe just work whenever you feel like it.
You two really love extremes. And both of you are right, and both of you are wrong. Because the problem isn't pressure, the problem is living under pressure all the time. The problem isn't rest, the problem is living anesthetized.
You needs discipline!
You need peace.
He needs awareness, because here's the shift you might not have noticed yet. You don't need to balance rush and rest, you need to decide when to use each one. Clock isn't a villain, he's movement energy. He's the one who helps you begin, but when he becomes fear, he accelerates you without purpose. Couch isn't a villain either. He's recovery energy, he protects you from collapse. But when he becomes escape, he paralyzes you with comfort.
Without me, he falls behind!
Without me, he breaks halfway through.
You two are tools, not leaders, and maybe the most common mistake is this. You let clock decide when to act, you let couch decide when to stop. But emotional maturity is something else. It's you saying, now I'm going to act even without motivation. And also saying, now I'm going to rest without guilt. See the difference? When you choose action consciously, anxiety decreases. When you choose rest consciously, guilt decreases.
So I step in when it's strategic!
And I step in when it's necessary.
Exactly. It's not about total silence. It's about inner leadership, because while the two of you fight for control, he lives reacting, but when he takes the lead, both of you start working for him, and that completely changes the experience of living. It's no longer about rushing or hiding, it's about choosing. Now let me ask you something uncomfortable. Have you been choosing your rhythm, or just reacting to whatever is the loudest? And you, You can pause for 2 seconds and ask, am I tired, or am I avoiding starting? If it's real exhaustion, then rest for real, without guilt, without scrolling, without comparison. Rest that actually restores you. Now, if it's avoidance, maybe the action needs to be small, very small. Another practical shift, define to clear moments in your day. A moment for intentional progress and a moment for intentional pause. Clock participates in the first, couch participates in the second. But you decide when each one begins and ends. No mixing, no working while pretending to rest, no resting while thinking about work. That's mental hygiene, separating the energy of action.
So I'm not allowed to show up all day.
You can, but not as escape, as care.
And I'm not allowed to pressure him all the time.
No, constant pressure doesn't create consistency. It creates exhaustion. Another simple practice. Observe your natural peaks. Are you more functional in the morning or at night? Clock loves comparing routines. But rhythm is personal. Conscious productivity isn't copying what works for someone else. It's respecting your own cycle, and maybe the most important practice of all. Learn how to end your day. Yes, end it. Not collapsing into the couch with guilt, and not going to bed with clock still shouting in your head. Choose a moment to say, today was enough. Even if it wasn't perfect, especially if it wasn't perfect. Because perfectionism feeds clock. Self-sabotage feeds couch. Awareness feeds balance. None of this is radical. None of it requires you to become a different person. It just requires you to start noticing and deciding a little more often. Small conscious decisions gradually change your internal rhythm. Now let me ask you something. If tomorrow you woke up and deliberately chose when to act and when to rest, what would change first? I want you to imagine a simple scene, late afternoon. The light isn't as strong anymore. Clock is quieter, couch too, and you're there, breathing. Not needing to prove anything for a few minutes. Because deep down, that's what you've been looking for. Not endless productivity. Not endless rest, peace with your own rhythm.
I just don't want you to waste your potential.
I just don't want you to get hurt along the way.
Do you see? Both of them are trying to protect you. They just exaggerate, like every extreme does. Maybe emotional maturity is this, learning to hear the intention behind the noise. When clock accelerates, maybe he's trying to protect you from regret. When couch rocks you gently, maybe he's trying to protect you from pain. But living well isn't about eliminating fear or discomfort. It's about learning to move through both with awareness. You don't need to become a perfectly disciplined machine. And you don't need to become a monk detached from the world. You just need to ask yourself honestly, what do I truly need right now? Sometimes it's action, sometimes it's pause. But when the decision is yours, the feeling changes, rest becomes lighter, action becomes focused, and the day stops feeling like an internal battle. Clock doesn't have to disappear, couch doesn't either. They just need to understand that you're the one in charge. And when you step into that place, urgency stops being panic. And pause stops being escape. It becomes strategy. It becomes care. It becomes life unfolding at your own rhythm. And maybe the most important question isn't, am I doing too much or too little, but instead, am I living consciously or reacting? If you could silence both of them for a moment right now, what kind of rhythm would appear inside you? And before you leave, let me tell you something interesting. Clock isn't the only one that pressures you. Couch isn't the only one that seduces you. There's a third character in this room. He doesn't speak loudly like the clock. He doesn't embrace you like the couch, he just reflects. And sometimes that's even more uncomfortable, because unlike the other two, he doesn't tell you what to do. He shows you who you're being. In the next episode, we're going to talk to the mirror, and maybe this will be the hardest conversation so far. Because it's one thing to argue with time. It's another thing to argue with comfort, but facing your own reflection. Without filters, without comparison, without justification, that changes everything. And I want to leave you with one honest question. If you looked at yourself in the mirror today, Would you see someone living at their own rhythm? Or someone reacting to the noise around them? Tell me in the comments, in which situations do you feel like you lose control of your rhythm the most? At work, while studying, on social media, at home. I read everything. And sometimes the comments become the next coffee. If this conversation brought you clarity, even a small one, subscribe, because here, we don't rush you. And we don't numb you either. We learn how to lead, and in the next episode, when the mirror walks into the room, maybe the question won't be, am I rushing too much or resting too much? Maybe it will be, am I becoming who I actually want to be? See you at the next coffee.